The moment I stepped through the imposing glass doors of Neurosync, my company, my empire, it felt as though time slowed to a crawl. Before me stood a line of security officers, their rigid forms conveying an unmistakable message. I was no longer welcome within these walls that had once felt like home. Their expressionless faces seemed to convey an unsettling mix of duty and indifference. Yet their mere presence spoke volumes about the shift in power dynamics that had taken place. In the first moments of this surreal encounter, I entertained the thought that perhaps this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe a junior executive had taken upon themselves to overstep their bounds, or perhaps my wife Lillian had neglected to inform security of my arrival. But then, my gaze caught hers in the executive boardroom, where she sat at the head of a long, polished table, exuding an air of control. Surrounded by a carefully curated board of directors, her commanding presence was undeniable. Our eyes locked, and in that chilling instant, the realization hit me like a freight train. This was no accident. There was no confusion here, only cold, calculated betrayal. "Miss Carter, you must accompany us," one of the security guards stated firmly, his voice devoid of empathy. Those words came from Lillian, the woman I had shared my life and dreams with. The weight of the moment crashed over me, and I could scarcely process the absurdity of it all. Here I stood, the man who had built this company alongside her, facing the woman who now stood resolute, arms crossed and lips pressed tight, radiating an icy determination. The boardroom fell into a stunned silence, a sea of tailored suits caught between amusement and apathy. Some feigned interest in their laptops, while others simply stared at me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and schadenfreude. Lillian broke the silence with a piercing declaration. "You're nothing," she proclaimed, her words slicing to the tension like a knife. My heart raced in response. I wanted to shout, to remind her that without my contributions, Neurosync would not exist. Yet, I held my tongue, recognizing the fierce look in her eyes, the same look she wore when she vanquished her competitors. In that moment, I had become the competition. The security guards stepped closer, their silent authority palpable and suffocating. I could have protested, caused a scene, demanded answers in front of the board, but I understood that was precisely what she wanted. Instead, I chose to smile, not a smile of defeat, but one of a man harboring a secret. Lillian was unaware of the patent I held, a safeguard that could dismantle everything she had built. With a decisive turn, I adjusted my suit and walked away, but not before locking eyes with her one last time. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." She dismissed me with a glance, and the guards escorted me down the hall, their presence unnecessary. I had no intention of fighting back. My thoughts were already racing ahead, plotting how I would dismantle her empire. As I stepped outside, the morning sun enveloped me, blinding yet warm. Any other man might have felt humiliated or defeated, but I felt an exhilarating sense of liberation. Lillian believed she had triumphed, convinced she had stripped me of everything, but betrayal is not instantaneous. It seeps in slowly, like water through cracks, until the foundation crumbles, leaving you bewildered as to how it all happened. In retrospect, I should have recognized the signs earlier, understood Lillian's strategy as she maneuvered her way to the top. When I first met her, she was not the ruthless executive celebrated in business magazines. She was desperate, and Neurosync was on the brink of failure. She had connections and investors, but lacked a viable product. That's when I entered the picture. As a software developer, I dedicated years to creating a revolutionary neural network capable of real-time optimization and self-reconstruction. It was my passion project, born from countless sleepless nights in a dimly lit apartment. I wasn't seeking fame or fortune. I simply wanted to create something meaningful and impactful. Our paths crossed at a tech summit. While others pitched hollow ideas, I was at a modest booth, showcasing my vision on an outdated laptop. Lillian observed from a distance, and when the crowd dissipated, she approached me with an air of authority. Arms crossed, her voice was smooth yet commanding. "You built this with purpose," she stated, not as a question but as a fact. "I think we need to talk." We talked for hours, and in my naivety, I revealed everything. My vision, my ambitions, my plans for future. I trusted her completely. For years, we labored side by side as equals, sharing late nights and early mornings. Our relationship deepened over time. culminating in marriage before Neurasync reached its first billion-dollar valuation. I believed we were building not just a company but a legacy, our child, but I was blind to the warning signs that would later become so glaringly obvious. Little by little, she began taking meetings without me, granting interviews on her own, and investors started to see me less as a co-founder and more as a lead engineer. One day, I discovered my name had been removed from the official company website, my title changed by the board without my knowledge. The most significant mistake of my life was signing the paperwork, merging our shares, and relinquishing control. In that moment, I ceased to be her partner. I became a disposable employee. But Lillian had underestimated me. I had prepared for this, not because I anticipated a corporate coup or betrayal, but because I understood how the industry operated. Too many inventors had been robbed of their creations. So, I built a safeguard, a hidden kill switch, not a dramatic Hollywood-style button, but a legally binding patent that I filed well before Neurasync's first round of funding. This patent, in my name, secured the core AI that powered the entire operation. Without it, the company was essentially worthless, and Lillian had no inkling of its existence. So, when security escorted me out, I offered no resistance. I knew precisely what would follow. The moment I entered the elevator, my phone vibrated with a notification. Patent renewal approved. Lillian had spent years trying to erase my contributions from Neurasync's history, believing she had triumphed, but she failed to realize I was the only one capable of taking everything from her. That night, with a glass of whiskey in one hand and my laptop in the other, I executed what she never anticipated. I revoked Neurasync's access to my technology. It took a mere 5 minutes, legal submission, confirmation email, and by morning, the company was spiraling into chaos. The first call came at dawn from a former colleague, Marcus. "What on earth is happening?" he asked, panic evident in his voice. Their AI was locked. Clients were panicking, and Lillian was about to grasp the true meaning of loss. I wasn't merely seeking to reclaim Neurasync. I intended to watch her empire burn, reflecting on my grievances, being ousted from my own company, having my work appropriated and my contributions forgotten. I allowed the weight of it all to settle before answering Marcus. "Nothing," I replied calmly. "I just wanted everyone to know." After explaining the feeling of losing everything, I sat back and observed the chaos unfold. For years, Lillian had rewritten history, but this was merely the beginning. There exists a specific kind of silence that envelopes a person when their future crumbles. Not the calm of tranquility or the anticipation of what's to come, but the stark realization of defeat. It was the same silence I experienced the night before, allowing me to sleep more soundly than I had in months, knowing what awaited. At precisely 6:07 a.m., my phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. "What have you done?" Lillian's voice was frantic, stripped of her usual confidence. "The system is down. Our credentials are being rejected everywhere. The AI isn't responding. Clients are calling. We can't log in or perform updates." She demanded answers, but before she could even contemplate fixing the problem, she needed to grasp just how broken it truly was. "Lillian," I responded steadily, "I no longer work for Neurasync. You made sure of that, remember?" There was a pause before she interjected. "Perhaps you should check with legal. They should have an update for you." A beat of silence followed, and then in a quieter voice she muttered, "You canceled the patent." I smiled, allowing her to absorb the gravity of her loss. "You can't do this," she exclaimed, her voice cracking. "You're undermining the company. Do you even understand how much money is at stake?" I leaned back, utterly unfazed. "I built the system, Lillian. I know exactly what's at stake." Another silence enveloped us. "Undo this, Marcus." I chuckled, then replied coolly, "You took everything from me, my company, my job, my identity. You cast me aside as if I were nothing. Did you truly believe it would just vanish?" For the first time, she was speechless. "Tell the board," I said before hanging up. I didn't need to check my phone again. By the time I finished my second cup of coffee, Neurasync was in freefall. Every executive login was denied. Clients were panicking, and by 8:15 a.m., investor confidence began to waver. By 8:30 a.m., the company's stock had plummeted 18%, and by 9 a.m., It had double that loss. Finally, the board did what I anticipated. They turned against her. The phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Lillian. It was one of the board members. I let it ring, allowing them to stew in their predicament before eventually answering. "Marcus, we've encountered an issue." After a long pause, I detected the crack in their arrogance. "We need your help." I reveled in the silence before replying, "That's interesting, because just last week, you all allowed Lillian to push me out like I was a junior engineer." Another pause, this time filled with desperation. "We're willing to reinstate you." I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. "Oh, I don't think so. I don't want my position back. I don't want Neurosync back. You all made your choice. Now you must live with it." Silence fell again, leading to the inevitable question. "What do you want?" "I just want everyone to know what it feels like to lose everything," I replied before hanging up. By 10 a.m., Lillian reached her breaking point. I had expected another call, but instead, she showed up at my door unannounced, desperate. For the first time, she stood there without her armor. No practice smirk, no confidence. Her fists were clenched, her face pale, lips pressed so tightly they nearly disappeared. For the first time, Lillian Carter appeared afraid. "Marcus, we can fix this," she pleaded. I tilted my head, unimpressed. There is no we left Lillian. For the first time in her life, uncertainty washed over her, and I was just getting started. By noon, it was over. Neurosync released a carefully crafted statement announcing that Lillian Carter was no longer CEO. Stripped of her title, she was rendered insignificant. No more magazine covers, no more television interviews, no more respect in the industry. After years of rewriting her narrative and convincing the world that she was the visionary behind Neurosync, she was now just another disgraced CEO. This wasn't merely a corporate scandal. It was personal. Neurosync was no longer celebrated for its innovation. It became notorious for its betrayal. With Lillian at the center of it all, the empire she had built on deception was now crumbling, and I stood on the sidelines, witnessing the downfall of the woman who had once been my partner, my confidant, and ultimately my adversary.